On the celestial continent, in the howling forbidden land, atop a cliff, stood the ancient demon Chu, surrounded by numerous enemies. A strong bald man shouted, declaring that even though the demon Chu had spent his life killing people and committing evil deeds, today would be the day of his death. A woman was furious with the demon Chu because he had killed her sister. Everyone there was seeking revenge, as Chu was the greatest villain. Suddenly someone called out to him, and when he turned, he saw a woman flying on her sword. She asked if he was regretful now that everyone was against him. This woman was named Mengdi. She was the master of the rising sky peak of the Taisu Holy Land. Chu began to laugh and asked if she really thought he was remorseful, as he had spent his entire life cultivating and fighting, and among those in the same domain, Chu was still superior. He said that the only thing he regretted was how merciless time was, and that if he had another 1,000 years, no one would dare to go against him. This angered Mengdi, and she said that since Chu had no regrets, he could not blame her for being ruthless. She then began to use her sword technique. She called everyone else who wanted revenge against Chu and ordered them all to attack Chu together to kill him. Chu began forming several seals with his left hand. When Chu finished making the seals, he smiled. The people seeking revenge against Chu said that Chu was plotting something and that they couldn't let him succeed. They used the heavenly Dharma, surrounded Chu, and struck at him. Using the 3,000 worlds ability, Chu took the blow head on. All wounded, Chu started laughing, and with a sinister expression, said that the emperor lamented not becoming immortal and achieving longevity. But he, Chu, would never lament anything. Chu stabbed his sword into the ground, and suddenly, a massive explosion of energy occurred, destroying everything around him. But in the end, Chu died. The people who wanted revenge against Chu wondered if he had sacrificed himself. The old man with a beard said it was a pity because if Chu had gone to the Tianyuan Great Wall and killed wild beasts, he would have become a great general of the human race. At the end of the day, after that battle against Chu, people said he had sacrificed himself. It was truly a pity. Chu's consciousness thought, did they really believe that I, known as the demon Chu, would die like this? In the Taisu Holy Land, there are 18 peaks, and the masters of the Prosperous Sky, Rising Sky, and Sword Sky peaks were the strongest in the entire Holy Land, and were located in the Upper Holy Domain. The masters of the remaining peaks were located in the Lower Holy Domain. A month later, at Rising Sky Peak, in the mansion of the peak's heir disciple, Chu smiled and said he was back. Chu said that before he was reborn, he was a university student, and to resurrect, he had already thought of thousands of methods, so his death had been entirely calculated. Chu smiled and thought that his preparation had been meticulous. How could they think he would die so easily? Chu stood up and realized that he was in the Taisu Holy Land and said he was destined to be there. A system screen appeared saying, User resurrection detected. System function has changed. Please choose one of the new functions below. 1. Destiny villain. As long as you commit evil, you will receive rewards from the system. 2. Well-trained villain. Having died once and knowing all the sufferings, you now choose to hide and cultivate in secret to become strong and then return to commit evil. Chu thought that in his past life, he chose to be the destiny villain and committed countless evil deeds, but admitted it had been a lot of fun. However, after everyone started hunting him, it became a nuisance. But in this reincarnation, he would choose a different path. He would become strong in secret and then destroy the world, aiming to become a sacred disciple. Chu chose the well-trained villain function. New function selected. Loading. New function loading complete. Chu tells the system to open the status panel and thinks about what his body would be like in this life. The system opens the status window. User. Chishu. Identity. Heir disciple of Rising Sky Peak. Domain. None. Destroyed. Qualifications. 17. Normal. Cultivation method. Because the user's soul is very strong and took over this body, the strength and methods were erased. Luck value. Less than 18. Bad luck. Cultivation points. 0. Combat power. Slightly stronger than a chicken. Chu wonders if he was really the heir disciple of Rising Sky Peak, and comments that his qualifications were normal, his luck was bad, and his strength was only slightly stronger than a chicken's. Incredulous, Chu asks what the previous owner of that body did to be in such a condition. 10 days ago, the previous owner of that body, the heir disciple of Rising Sky Peak, and the heir disciple of Sword Peak, had a life-or-death battle in the arena out of jealousy over a woman. In the arena, the heir disciple of Rising Sky Peak was defeated with a single blow and had his cultivation destroyed, suffering unimaginable humiliation. After discovering what had happened, Chu comments that the former owner of the body was utterly ridiculous, getting beaten up like a side character because of jealousy. But now that the body was his, the former owner's enemies were also his enemies, and he would avenge him. Chu declares that they should wait, for he would cultivate until that body became invincible. An hour later, Chu thinks that the body was very useless, as it had a serious injury and no cultivation. However, Chu smiles and says that it didn't matter, for luckily, he had other methods. At Rising Sky Peak, a group of people was talking about how the Peak Master, who had killed the Demon Chu, had returned 3 days ago. One of them asks if the Demon Chu was really dead. Another responds that the Demon Chu was invincible against those in the same domain, but compared to the other 10 Supreme Saints, he was a domain below, so he couldn't win. Another cultivator comments that he hoped they would kill all the people of that kind. Chu, hearing this behind a tree, became irritated and thought that those insignificant nobodies had no idea that not only was he not dead, but he had also become a disciple of the Holy Land, and if he couldn't go against them, then he would join them. Things were going to get very interesting there. Chu approaches them and coughs to get their attention. The cultivators notice Chu there and greet him, asking if he had recovered from his injuries. Chu replies that it wasn't that serious and walks away. The blue-clad cultivator comments that Chu had the same name as the old Demon Chu. The black-clad cultivator asks if Chu had any relation to the old Demon Chu, but no one knew. The red-clad cultivator responds that they were overthinking, because if that were the case, he should have at least half of the old Demon Chu's cultivation talent. but his cultivation had been destroyed by someone else in a petty fight over a woman. Chu climbs the stairs until he reaches Chi Mengdi's mansion. Upon reaching the door, he calls for his master, saying that her disciple has something to discuss. The protagonist enters and goes to his master. Mengdi comments that 10 days had passed since he fought and was injured, but only now did he come to see her. Did he need his master's help to continue on the path of cultivation? Chu kneels and pleads, "Master, please." Mengdi responds that Chu's cultivation was low, yet he still dared to fight stronger disciples over a woman. He deserved to have his cultivation destroyed, so she could not help him and asked him to leave. Chu replies that his cultivation was low, and she didn't know the reason for that. How could he become strong without cultivation resources if all the resources were given to the second junior brother, third junior sister, fourth junior brother, and fifth junior sister? How could he become strong if he received nothing? Mengdi slaps her hand and says that he was very audacious because he had always been a fool who never put effort into cultivating, but now he was claiming that his master was unfair for not giving him anything. It was truly ridiculous. The protagonist says that she didn't give him resources because he had the same name as the old demon Chu, which is why she was always disgusted by him. Mengdi replies that she was never disgusted by him, but that it would be better for him to leave and wait because she would find a treasure between heaven and earth that could heal him. She would definitely help him continue on the path of cultivation. Chu, with a cynical smile, says no, as she could help him right there and then. Mengdi asks how she could help him. The protagonist responds that it was said she had the heavenly fragrance body, and approaching her, Chu suggests that if they performed dual cultivation together, not only would he recover, but his cultivation would also greatly increase. Mengdi becomes serious and asks what he was talking about. The protagonist replies that he was suggesting dual cultivation with her and kisses his master's hand, leaving her blushing and flustered. Mengdi, blushing, says he is an unfaithful disciple and asks if he wants to die. How dare he humiliate his master like this? Mengdi becomes angry and with her fingers points her sword at Chu, saying she would ensure that his limbs would be cut off and he would be expelled from the sect. Chu smiles and uses some seals. The master's sword begins to disintegrate, and she starts to feel weak, her legs giving way. Mengdi asks what is happening as she cannot use her superior saint cultivation, and ends up collapsing on the ground. Chu approaches and says he promises to be gentle. Mengdi, blushing, calls him an unfaithful disciple, and asks what he thinks he is doing to his master. The protagonist tells her to relax because he is helping his disciple learn and follow the correct path of the Tao. The cultivation domains are Foundation Establishment Domain, Spiritual Sea Domain, Spiritual Pillar Domain, Spiritual Domain, Spiritual Tao Domain, Divine Domain, Lower Saint Domain, Upper Saint Domain, Saint King Domain, Emperor Domain, and Great Emperor Domain. Below the Emperor Domain, each domain is divided into layers. The 1st to 3rd layers are called the lower layer, the 4th to 6th layers are called the intermediate layer, and the 7th to 9th layers are called the upper layer. Mengdi calls him an unfaithful disciple and asks what he did to her. She wonders why she can't use her powers. It feels as if she is an ordinary person. The protagonist, in his thoughts, says it's obvious that he sealed his master's cultivation because on the day the superior saints were hunting him, before dying, he placed the celestial reincarnation seal on his body. It was an artifact he had received from the system for doing evil deeds. The artifact, called the celestial reincarnation seal, is a divine class sealing artifact. It allows placing a servant seal on a cultivator's body, and by activating it with a few words, it is possible to seal all of the target's cultivation. The artifact has 2 uses, and it is necessary to combine 2 seals for it to be effective. The protagonist thinks that now, upon realizing this, any female cultivator below the Great Emperor Domain would have no choice but to obey everything he commands. Chu says that despite her age, Mengdi is still very beautiful and desirable. Mengdi, embarrassed, calls him unfaithful and asks how he dares to say such things to his master, and if he isn't afraid she might kill him. The protagonist laughs and tells her to try killing him instead of just talking. Mengdi, embarrassed, turns her face away. Chu comments that if Master Liu Shui of Sharp Sky Peak knew her cultivation was sealed, what would she do? Because as far as he knew, the master had killed Mengdi's father, and with such a good opportunity, she wouldn't miss the chance to avenge her father's death. Mengdi, shocked, thinks she can't let Liu Shui find out, as that woman is crazy and would definitely kill her. The master calls the protagonist an unfaithful disciple and says that the artifacts of heaven and earth and cultivation resources, she would hand over everything, and he could choose whatever he wanted. Chu grabs Mengdi and says he doesn't just want that. What he wants is her. Mengdi, embarrassed, responds that it is impossible, absolutely impossible, saying, "Don't even think about it. I am a master in the superior saint domain, and I will not be abused by you." The protagonist thought that he had no grudge against the Taisu Holy Land, but he wondered why Mengdi had joined forces with the group that was hunting him and asked if she was afraid. He mentioned that he had an ancient secret cultivation art that could be beneficial for both of them, and told her to take a look. Mengdi wondered where this unfaithful disciple had obtained such a miraculous secret art. That secret art was connected to the heavenly Tao and was something incredible and absolute. The protagonist asked her what she thought, but the master responded by telling him to leave. Chu approached Mengdi and asked her to accept this disciple, but the master said he was very unfaithful. A system screen appeared, stating that the user had become an unfaithful disciple, which was a big problem. As expected of a great villain, he obtained 1,000 cultivation points. The system informed that the user and Chi Mengdi were performing dual cultivation, which completely healed the user's injuries and increased his cultivation qualifications. The user's qualifications increased to 317 celestial, and with that, his cultivation speed was increased 20-fold. The user's cultivation was enhanced, advancing through the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and even the 8th layer of the Foundation Establishment domain. A few hours later, Chu and Mengdi finished their dual cultivation, and a new system screen appeared, stating that the user's cultivation had advanced to the 9th layer of the Foundation Establishment domain. The protagonist then turned, thanked his master, and said they would see each other on other days, telling her to rest well. Mengdi told Chu that he had already taken advantage of her and gotten everything he wanted, so he could remove the seal he used to seal her cultivation. Chu turned to the master and said that, of course, he couldn't. The master asked if he wanted his master to die. The protagonist replied that if she didn't want others to know that her cultivation was sealed, then she had better be obedient. Chu took a crystal in his hand and asked if she knew the function of the image crystal in his hand and started to laugh. Mengdi, deeply embarrassed, asked if he had recorded everything. The protagonist told her not to be angry, as he just wanted to remember her shaking her little butt and moaning loudly. As he left, Chu said that because of their relationship as disciple and master, he would give her a warning, not to even try to remove the seal because, across the entire celestial continent, only he knew how to remove the seal, unless she knew a great emperor. But she knew there was no great emperor in that world, and if that disciple died, she would have to live her entire life as a common person and die of old age. And if she didn't believe him, she could try. Moreover, if he died, everything recorded on that crystal would spread everywhere. How would the people of the continent react to watching a respected master doing such things with her disciple? Mengdi, outraged, said that he was an unfaithful disciple and would have a horrible death. She screamed that he was very evil and wondered how an insect, not even in the spiritual Tao domain, could have the power to seal her cultivation. At night, Chu commented that now that he had noticed, he had spent a long time with the master because the moon was already shining in the sky. With the help of his master, he had managed to advance to the new layer of the Foundation Establishment domain, but he had to wait for his master to rest to perform dual cultivation again and break through to the spiritual sea domain. The protagonist began to think that the spiritual sea domain was like a wooden barrel to store water, so the Foundation Establishment domain is the process of creating the barrel. The more stable the foundation, the larger and more resistant the water barrel would be, and naturally he would have a good foundation to tread the path of cultivation. The failure in his previous life was due to advancing too quickly through the cultivation domains, and because of that, he never took the time to stabilize his foundation. But now, he would have a solid and supreme foundation. Now, even if he faced a cultivator in a domain above his own, he could still kill them. The protagonist wondered if the cultivation resources he had gathered in his previous life were still in that hidden ravine, but even if they were, how could he leave the Taisu Holy Land? Chu saw the pavilion of flying boats and thought that taking a flying boat would be a good opportunity. The protagonist took a flying boat and headed towards the hidden ravine. Upon arriving near the ravine, he entered a cave. Chu approached a dry tree and thought that the cultivation resources he had stored in his past life were hidden around there. He disembarked from the boat and walked towards the dry tree. Chu bit his finger and began to write a seal on the stone near the dry tree. Suddenly, the stone disappeared, revealing a large chest with several pouches around it. The protagonist remarked that the resources he had stored were still there and hoped that with them, he could become stronger and regain his former glory. Suddenly, someone called the protagonist Trash Chu and said they never thought they would meet again. Out of nowhere, a flying boat with several cultivators appeared above Chu. One of the cultivators commented that, to his surprise, it was just Trash Chu, mentioning that he thought Chu was already dead, as he never imagined that Chu would recover and start walking around after just 10 days. This cultivator was Jiang Meng, the heir disciple of Sword Sky Peak. He remarked that the master of Rising Sky Peak took very good care of her disciple, to the point of using an artifact between heaven and earth capable of restoring his cultivation. Chu reflected that it had only been 10 days since Jiang Meng had destroyed the cultivation of the body he was using. That insect forced him to start cultivating from scratch and still had the audacity to offend him. Determined, Chu boarded his flying boat and said that later he would make Jiang Meng pay, declaring that in 10 days they would face each other again in a life-or-death battle in the arena. Surprised, Meng asked the other cultivators if he really heard that, and they, laughing, confirmed that Chu said he wanted to fight another life-or-death battle in the arena against Jiang Meng. They found it absurd that trash still dared to challenge Brother Jiang. Jiang, using the 1,000-mile sound transfer technique, began calling Chu trash and stated that on that day, he didn't kill him out of respect for the master of Rising Sky Peak. But now, after being challenged again, they would face each other in the arena in a life-or-death battle, with no remorse for being cruel. The people, shocked, questioned why Chu dared to challenge Jiang Meng again, speculating that he had gone mad. After all, his cultivation in the spiritual sea domain had been destroyed, so how would he face Meng, who was in a higher layer? Everyone predicted that there would be another massacre in 10 days. Chu, in his flying boat, stopped at Chimengdi's mansion. He commented that his master's mansion was full of spiritual power and decided to stay there to cultivate, believing that his master wouldn't mind since everything that was hers was also his. Upon entering Mengdi's mansion, Chu called her beautiful and said he had returned to see her again. Mengdi asked what he was doing there so late, and Chu responded by asking what she meant by that question. When the master asked him not to come closer, Chu, already near her, commented that he knew how to do worse things and asked if she wanted to see. Chu began making several arrangements and activated them, surrounding Mengdi's entire mansion. The master, surprised, asked if he had inherited the ancient Tao of arrangements, to which Chu replied that she had a keen eye and asked if she wanted to learn, questioning what she had to offer in exchange for that knowledge. Mengdi crossed her arms and said she wasn't interested in learning. Chu then declared that if that was the case, he would go into seclusion to cultivate, and if the master felt hungry, he had brought something for her to eat, reminding her that with her cultivation sealed, she was a common human and needed to eat to survive. The master turned her face away, blaming him for everything, and vowing that someday she would kill him. Chu slapped his master on the butt, leaving her completely embarrassed, and said she was behaving very badly. He warns her that he placed some deadly formations at the back of the mansion and doesn't recommend that she go there because he still needs to improve his cultivation qualification, and if she ended up dying, he would be very sad. Blushing, Mungdi says that one day she will cut him into thousands of pieces, calling him a damn unfaithful disciple. At the back of the mansion, Chu examines the information about an item from the system, the Life and Creation Dao Fruit, an extremely precious immortal treasure capable of creating an incredibly solid foundation for cultivators and allowing an ordinary person to directly break through to the spiritual domain, extending their life by 1,000 years. This fruit grew at the bottom of the celestial demon abyss and could only be harvested after 10,000 years. It was so rare that, according to reports, a master of the Holy Land exchanged 3 celestial class martial arts and 2 immortal class martial arts for a Life and Creation Dao fruit to help his beloved disciple establish a solid foundation in cultivation. Chu thinks about using that fruit, which has been considered since ancient times as a treasure between heaven and earth, capable of creating an extremely solid foundation. By doing so, he could use the divine class Dao scripture. Even though it was thanks to the Life and Creation Dao fruit in the system, he wondered if there was any cultivator on the celestial continent with a stronger foundation than his. Chu takes the Life and Creation Dao fruit and begins to eat it. The fruit quickly takes effect, and Chu activates the Dao scripture, starting the process of recreating his foundation. Suddenly, a system window appears, informing him that his cultivation has been reduced to the 8th layer of the foundation establishment domain, then to the 6th, the 3rd, and finally to the mortal domain. Then, a choice option appears in the system. Do you wish to break through to the next domain? Yes or no? Chu promptly selects yes. The system detects that he used the strongest technique for foundation building, the Dao scripture, and warns that the consumption of cultivation points will increase, with the estimated time to advance each layer being 1 month. Another message informs him that 100 cultivation points will be required to advance each month. As time passes, the system tracks Chu's progress. After 1 month, he advances to the 1st layer of the foundation establishment domain. After 2 months, he advances to the 2nd layer. After 3 months, he reaches the 3rd layer, and after 4 months, he attains the 4th layer of the foundation establishment domain. Deeply focused on his cultivation, Chu recalls that everyone believed the 9th layer was the limit, blindly following the path of their ancestors. However, he knew that there existed a 10th layer, accessible only to those who surpassed their limits and discovered the right path. Breaking and rebuilding, between life and death, involved great fear, but also offered great opportunities. 7 days later, Chu finally manages to advance his cultivation, and a new system window appears, informing him that he has advanced to the 10th layer of the foundation establishment domain. It took 10 months and 1,000 cultivation points to achieve this feat. With his cultivation points now exhausted, Chu shouts, declaring that he has made significant progress. On a mountain, there was a large hurricane with several lightning bolts. At Sword Sky Peak, a woman was observing the whole situation. In her thoughts, the woman realized that there was a very powerful energy fluctuation and wondered if it was Chimengdi who was advancing. This woman is Liu Shui, the master of Sword Sky Peak. The protagonist thought that the condensation of his flesh and soul had reached its limit, and with his solid foundation, he would break the chains and advance to the spiritual sea domain. Suddenly, a system window appears, informing him that the user is about to break through to the spiritual sea domain, and that with a solid foundation, it will be possible to advance to the 10th layer. Chu comments that he didn't expect to unlock the reward system so easily, and checks the reward he received. The protagonist jumps and punches the air, creating a great pressure in the water when another system message appears, informing him that he has achieved perfection and that the reward system has been unlocked. The system congratulates the user on receiving the sacred primordial body. Chu is shocked and wonders what this sacred primordial body is. The system informs him that the sacred primordial body requires a large amount of resources to be cultivated. Then the system alerts that the sacred primordial body is now fusing with the user. Frustrated, Chu exclaims, asking what the hell is happening. The system then informs him that the fusion of the sacred primordial body has been successfully completed. Chu laments, saying that he had consumed many resources to break through to the spiritual sea domain, and now he had the sacred primordial body. He complains about the damn system, asking how he is supposed to cultivate now. Suddenly a new system window appears, explaining the advantages of the sacred primordial body. During the primordial era, it was an invincible physique against those of the same level and unmatched against those of stronger levels, being the most powerful physique a human could achieve. However, the system also points out the weaknesses of the sacred primordial body. At the end of the primordial era, the laws of heaven and earth changed, and cultivating the sacred primordial body requires many resources. Even using all the resources of the Holy Land, it would be very difficult to reach the initial stages, causing stagnation in the user's foundation. In conclusion, the system states that nowadays, the sacred primordial body is useless. However, the system encourages Chu not to be discouraged, suggesting that if there are no resources, he should steal, rob from everyone he can, and kill all his enemies. The system believes it can fully develop the sacred primordial body if cultivation points are converted into resources. The protagonist asks how he would know how many cultivation points are needed to achieve this, and how he could exchange the cultivation points. The system then opens the profile window. User, Chu Shu, Identity, Heir of Rising Sky Peak, Cultivation, First Layer of the Spiritual Sea Domain, Constitution, Sacred Primordial Body, Qualifications, 317 Celestial, Cultivation Techniques, Dao Jing Foundation, Initial Chapter Cultivation Points, 0, Luck, less than 18 black, can absorb luck by killing those who have it. Note: luck affects your situation. People with luck can grow strong without much effort. Combat evaluation, 19 times stronger compared to people of the same cultivation. Chu thinks that now that he has gained the sacred primordial body, he has no choice but to cultivate. He gives a sinister smile and comments that, fortunately, he still has his master. Chu leaves the back of the mansion and begins walking toward his master. In Mengdi's mansion, the master was peacefully eating an apple when someone asked if it was delicious. Mengdi responded that yes, it was delicious. When she realized who was speaking, she became angry and called him an unfaithful disciple. Chu commented that a few days without seeing her felt like seasons had passed. The protagonist sniffed his master and asked how long it had been since she last took a bath. Mengdi, irritated, responded that if he hadn't placed deadly formations at the back of the mansion, she would have a place to bathe. Chu took his master's hand and admitted that it was the fault of this disciple, offering to give her a bath. He reassured her, saying not to worry because he still liked her, even if she hadn't bathed. Mengdi asked what he planned to do with her at the back of the mansion. Chu said that, as expected of someone with the celestial fragrance body, her skin was so white and soft, even after a few days without bathing. The master, completely embarrassed, called him an unfaithful disciple. The protagonist kisses his master's hand and asks her to improve his talent and let him wash her back. The master, blushing deeply, turns her face away and calls him a damn unfaithful disciple. But soon she realizes someone is outside. In the outer pavilion of Mengdi's mansion, outside, stood Tian Jin, the master of prosperous Sky Peak. Jin calls out to Mengdi and asks if she had gone into seclusion to cultivate. Mengdi responds and apologizes, explaining that she had some issues with her cultivation and therefore couldn't come out to meet him. Suddenly a system window appears saying, "My god, the user is very bad and has once again taken advantage of his master to perform dual cultivation. Reward received, Azure Blood Sword." Jin tells his sister that he has a 7th grade healing pill, made by Feng Tian's disciple from Red Sky Peak, that could help her. Another system window suddenly appears saying, "Dual cultivation successfully completed, user's qualification increased by 100. Mengdi, with a trembling voice, says that she doesn't need it, as all she needs is a few days of rest. Another system window appears saying, "Dual cultivation successfully completed, user's qualification increased by 100. Jin says that's fine then, and asks if she knew that her disciple, Chu Shu, had challenged Zhang Meng from Sword Sky Peak to a life-and-death duel. He had heard that his younger sister's disciple was lazy and untalented, and he feared that if Chu lost, it would tarnish the honor of Rising Sky Peak. Mengdi, still with a trembling voice, says that she is aware of the challenge and that her disciple is responsible for his own actions, so she will let him handle it. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, "User's qualifications have reached 617 celestial. Therefore, cultivation speed will be increased by 25 times. Tianjin says that his younger sister has her own considerations, and that he was intruding. He mentions that the name of the song he is playing is Courting the Phoenix, and that he was inspired by the moon's glow a few nights ago. He then says he will play it for his younger sister. Chu and Mengdi were lying down while listening to the music. Mengdi, blushing, thought that even while she was talking with her elder brother Tianjin, her disciple didn't stop doing those things to her. Chu comments that Master Tianjin is really amazing with the flute, and he almost wanted to give him a like. The master tells her disciple to go to hell. The protagonist, with a sinister smile, says that seeing how close they were, he wouldn't mind borrowing some cultivation resources. Suddenly, a system window appears saying, "The user is very wicked. In addition to taking advantage of his master, he also took the cultivation resources. Very wicked. Reward, 500 cultivation points." In the Blue Butterfly Mansion, Chi Mengdi's residence, Chu comments that all the pills present are only 4th grade. The 5th grade ones, being rare, were not available. Mengdi replies that complaining won't help since she cannot open her storage ring to retrieve other treasures, while the seal he placed on her remains. The protagonist responds that it doesn't matter, as there are already plenty of resources there, so it's better than nothing. He thanks his master and leaves. The master considers asking the Holy Land master for help. Perhaps she could remove the seal. However, Mengdi, thoughtfully, decides against it because Chu mentioned that only he could remove it, and if she tried, he would know and might leave. The master, unwilling to accept her fate, wonders if she will remain immortal forever until she dies of old age. No, she is Chi Mengdi. She cannot accept that destiny. The master retrieves a hidden mask and says that fortunately, before her unfaithful disciple sealed her cultivation, she managed to remove and store a treasure. Moreover, he didn't search thoroughly. If he had, he would have taken the bronze fox mask. Even though it couldn't restore her cultivation level, she would use the mask to erase her presence, because as long as she had no contact with others, no one would know her cultivation had been sealed. This way, none of her enemies would hunt her down. Mengdi recalls that the mask belonged to the old demon. When he was being hunted, he dropped it. It's a pity that old demon Chu died after 100 years of cultivation. He had a great future, and if he had cultivated correctly, he wouldn't have been hunted and killed. But that matter doesn't matter now, as it's in the past. She still needs to find a way to remove that seal as soon as possible. Otherwise, she would be nothing more than a slave for him to use and enjoy. Chu senses something. In his room, he thinks that his master finally put on the bronze fox mask. It's a good thing she did because it would be difficult for him to grow stronger if someone discovered her cultivation was sealed. He feels very proud of his master. The protagonist, with the azure blood sword he received from the system, thinks that although it's not the best, it's not too bad either. He only has 3 days until the life and death battle in the arena. It's enough time to cultivate and refine his sword. Chu begins refining his sword in his room until he grasps the essence of the sword. Suddenly, a system window appears, saying, "Congratulations to the user for understanding the essence of the sword and refining it. A sword intent above the Raisu Holy Land has been detected." The protagonist begins to fly with his sword intent. As he flies, the system window tracks the miles he covers in Raisu Holy Land. 800 miles, 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles, 9,999 miles. Suddenly Chu's eyes start to shine, and he wonders if this is the sword intent. The protagonist begins to comprehend the sword intent when suddenly it heads towards his forehead. He fully comprehends the sword intent when a system window appears saying, "Congratulations to the user for successfully encountering the Heavenly Sword Intent. Heavenly Killer Sword Intent. Category, Sword Intent. Attribute, Wind." Chu comments that the Heavenly Killer Sword Intent is highly compatible with him. The protagonist, delighted, says he will return to his master's mansion and use the system to enhance the Heavenly Killer Sword Intent. If he manages to strengthen the Heavenly Killer Sword Intent, winning the life and death duel would be very easy. In the Taisu Holy Land, at the Pacific Sky Peak, Tai Suzy, the master of the Taisu Holy Land and the Pacific Sky Peak, mentions that she sensed someone from the Holy Land seeking the sword intent. It was very interesting. Suddenly she realizes that this person actually managed to ascend 9,999 miles in search of the sword intent. How is that possible? In the last 30,000 years, only the sword god, who was in the Emperor domain, had the ability to achieve this. Suzy wonders if there is someone in her Taisu Holy Land with the potential to become the sword god. 3 days later, at Prosperous Sky Peak, in the arena where the life and death battle would take place, several people gathered to watch the fight. Jian Lingyun, from Sword Sky Peak, comments that the atmosphere was very lively. Zhang Meng tells Lingyun that he heard that recently he managed to break through to the divine domain. Lingyun responds that it was just the divine domain, nothing worth mentioning. Lingyun sees Xu Tianzhen, a disciple of Sword Sky Peak, and comments that he didn't expect her to show up there since she usually doesn't care about these things. Xu Tianzhen responds that this matter started because of her, so it was obvious she would attend. After all, Chu Xiu was dear to her, and she didn't want him to die there. Jian Lingyun, intrigued, thinks that Chu was a worthless person and had nothing special, but his younger sister Xu really appreciated him a lot. Meng comments to Tianzhen that it was impossible even for her to save a man who wanted to die. A bystander says that Chu was very weak, but even so, he had the courage to challenge Brother Zhang. He really wanted to die. Other bystanders say that Chu didn't show up because he was afraid, and they didn't understand how the Rising Sky Peak could tolerate him and still call him an elder brother. Tao Yao, the fifth disciple of Rising Sky Peak, tells the bystanders that praising the strong and humiliating the weak was what their master taught them. The bystanders, shocked, comment that Tao Yao also came to watch the battle. Blushing, they call her Sister Tao Yao. One of the bystanders sees Chu arriving and announces that Chu Xiu has appeared. Chu arrives on his flying boat, and Tao Yao runs to greet him. Chu says he is happy that she came to watch his battle. Yao responds that with all their younger sisters around, no one would dare kill him. The protagonist says she doesn't need to worry because he wouldn't disappoint her. The younger sister comments that in the last battle she did nothing, and he got hurt, which made her very uneasy and sad. Chu calls her a silly girl and says it's alright, that it wasn't her fault. The protagonist turns and sees Xu Tianzhen, thinking that if he wasn't mistaken, she was the goddess of Sword Sky Peak. She had a good appearance, and her cultivation base wasn't bad at all. Tianzhen feels that Chu Xiu seems like a different person. Meng asks Lingyun if, now that Chu has arrived, he should kill him. Lingyun responds that in a life and death battle in the arena, even if he died, no one could question it, so he could kill him painfully. Meng tells Brother Lingyun not to worry because Chu Xiu was going to die. Zhang Meng steps into the arena and tells Chu that since they were both there, they should start the life and death battle right away. After all, after this battle, he still needed to return and cultivate in seclusion. Chu asks him to wait a minute because there was something he needed to say. At Prosperous Sky Peak in the arena, Chu comments to the bystanders how rare it was to have them all gathered in the same place to watch a battle. He recalls that they shouldn't forget about the bets, and reveals that he had a vial containing 6 7th grade Tianxuan pills, all of superior quality, which he intended to use for betting. Suddenly, a system window appears informing him that the user was deceiving the brothers and sisters of the Holy Land, pretending to be weak to defeat a tiger and thus obtain more resources, with the system promising a reward of 300 cultivation points. The bystanders, incredulous, ask if that pill was the legendary Tianxuan pill. Some comment that they heard this pill could increase someone's speed in the divine domain and even help to break through to a higher domain, reaching the lower saint domain. Jin Lingyun asks the protagonist how the bet would work, reflecting that, although he had broken through to the divine domain a few days ago and needed the pills, he never imagined that trash like Chu Xiu would bring them to his doorstep. Tao Yao thinks that if their master knew that the elder brother bet such a treasure, he would be punished. Chu, for his part, comments that he believed most people didn't know the value of 6 7th grade Tianxuan pills and asks the great elder of Prosperous Sky Peak if he knew. The elder confirms, explaining that many cultivators desired this pill, but few could buy it, as at auctions, each was sold for 1 million superior spiritual stones, totaling 6 million superior spiritual stones for the 6 pills. Everyone is astonished, wondering if there was anything to bet that compared to 6 million superior spiritual stones. Chu reassures everyone, suggesting that if someone couldn't bet that much, they could join together to bet, and if they won, they would only need to divide based on the value bet. The bystanders agree and begin betting on Chu's defeat. The protagonist advises them to bet safely, while Chu thinks he's going to win big, as many were betting on his defeat. The elder notices that many good resources were being wagered. Chu then announces that the betting time was over, and with the elder of Prosperous Sky Peak as the arbiter, no one would dare to go back on their word. He jumps into the arena to face Meng, who, feeling superior, comments that finally the trash Chu has stepped into the arena. The protagonist responds that since they would have a life and death battle, the only thing that mattered was being the winner.